oh, there was a time when Reanimator might have been the most feared deck in Legacy. It was certainly on the top 5 best decks list, right? And then just kind of dropped off.
Well, when Gristlebrand first came out, I remember in the community there's a lot of people saying, we need to ban Gristlebrand. This guy is too good. Reanimator is too good now. And I mean, like, history has showed us that, like, no, Reanimator wasn't too good. It's good, but it was beatable.
It was good, especially when people were not prepared for it. Now people are prepared for it, but it's like cyclical, right? Where eventually people are like, oh, well, I don't have to fight Reanimator. I don't need as much graveyard hate or as many Caracases, things of that nature. And then it's like, oh, well, people aren't doing that stuff. Maybe Reanimator's good again.
Edward Warren lost playing for top 8 yesterday with green-white, trying to avenge that and make top 8 today. He's at 4-1. Turn 1, we see a Jataxian Probe from Warren. And in response, Lowry's going to go ahead and hide all the cards that matter. So Warren gets to see a hand of Echoing Truth, Force of Will, and 4 lands. So the 2 business cards certainly hiding in Troy's hand.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, if I were Troy, I think the card that I would want on top of my library right now is another Brainstorm to get rid of that excess lands, or those excess lands. It's just like, Reanimator can function pretty well on 2 lands. Maybe you want a 3rd one to help pay for days.
Yeah. On the spectrum of combo decks in Legacy, Reanimator is not on, like, is not Belcher level fast, but it's not High Tide level slow either. It's still like, it's like a medium fast combo deck.
Right, and to further hammer that point home, you see that Troy has 2 Lotus Petals in his main deck. He's not going hard on all 4, right? But occasionally they help. So medium fast is a good way to put it.
Yeah. I think the reason we don't see this deck as much is if you go back to Return to Ravnica, printings of cards like Deathrite Shaman and Rest in Peace are both like some of the strongest graveyard hate cards we have in Legacy. And at the same time, like, Reanimator was already main decking some number of show and tells. You see Troy has 2 in the main. And I just think a lot of your Reanimator players said, you know, I don't want to try to dodge these Rest in Pieces anymore. I'm just going to play Sneak and Show.
Right, exactly. Like, how good is the graveyard stuff if I have to play show and tell main deck? Why am I not just playing a show and tell deck?
Right. We see the draw for Troy was an Intuition. And he's going to go ahead and play a fetch land here. Maybe not. Yeah,
it was a show and tell.
It's a show and tell. Okay, yeah. A different 2 in a blue spell with an old card frame. All right, going back to Edward's side, he does have a Deathrite Shaman here. We'll see what he wants to go for. It's Ponder. There was not a land in the graveyard, so he couldn't make that Liliana that he may have wanted to get.
Yeah, Troy had a decision to make there. Like, you could fetch main phase to play around Stifle from Eddie, or you could just hold the land. You have a bunch of lands, so you don't really mind if you get stifled, right? Ideally, you're building up to 3 to cast Show and Tell.
Right.
But you really don't want to give him an extra land for his Deathrite Shaman.
And this is something that Edward's done with Bug Delver. He took it in more of, I was talking to him about it, he took it in more of a tempo direction rather than playing cards like Hymn to Turok that you sometimes see or maybe Thoughtseize. He's on the 4 Stifle package and playing like Jataxian Probe, something that you sometimes see out of Bug Delver. Like, to me, that's more indicative of a Rug Delver strategy.
Yeah, and that's basically what this is, where it functions like a Rug Delver deck, except you have Deathrite Shaman instead of Nimble Mongoose, and then black removal instead of red removal.
So he's going to ponder here. In response, Troy is going to Echoing Truth away the Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, that might give him the turn of reprieve, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting play because he didn't want Edward finding a fetch land, cracking it, and then having extra mana with the Deathrite. So he took this opportunity to just bounce the Deathrite before it could make mana. And
well, it could have floated a mana off of Troy's land.
Okay. We'll see whether or not it did. I don't believe so. And he's going to play Grafdigger's Cage for the turn off his Wasteland. And that's a pretty spicy one to have in this matchup.
Yeah, that's generally pretty good, especially after your opponent uses your Echoing Truth. But, I mean, you see Troy sitting on a couple copies of Show and Tell in his hand. Grafdigger's Cage is not that big of a deal right now for him. He's sideboarded around Graveyard Hate. He expected that.
Yeah, so he has 2 Show and Tells now in hand. As you'd said, drew the second one that turn. He doesn't have a monster yet. And Edward, with plenty of Graveyard Hate, you see Nile Spellbomb also in his hand to attack the graveyard. He's going to go ahead and recast, well, I was going to say recast Deathrite Shaman, but he's going to go a little more aggressive now. Doesn't have another land, so he'll play Delver of Secrets.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. The clock's kind of ticking on Eddie to actually put together a real clock and put some pressure on Troy before he can piece together the combo that he needs.
And I mean, and here's a difficult spot. Troy did get the monster he was looking for. He drew Elesh Norn for the turn. It's going to be pretty powerful if it works here. Fortunately for Edward, he's not dead to it. Elesh Norn's great at killing creatures. She's not that great at winning the game. She takes a while, and Edward does have a Liliana in his hand. He's 1 mana off from playing.
Yeah, and Liliana appears to be the only card in his deck outside of something like Toxic Deluge that can really deal with this Elesh Norn.
Yeah, so we see both players bring a card to show and tell. Edward brings a Deathrite Shaman. Almost wishes he hadn't, because it's going to hit the bin along with Delver's Secrets. And now the 4/7 Praetor is in play for Lowry. Edward will have a good number of turns to try to draw that land, but until he does, he's going to be taking 4. Remember, you actually cannot put a Liliana into play off show and tell because it was printed before Planeswalkers were around. So instead of saying people put a permanent into play, it lists the kind of card types you can put into play, and
right.
Planeswalker's not on it.
Yeah, the closest thing that ever happens to that is like the Planeswalker player puts in a land and is able to hardcast their Planeswalker, and hopefully that's good.
Yeah, as you see there, it says they may choose an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land. So basically they may choose a non-Planeswalker permanent and put it into play. It's funny because I think the intention was, like, in the design of the card was probably to put a tournament into play, but like at the time of the printing, you're like, yeah, like there's no functional difference in wording this and says put a permanent into play.
Yeah.
And we do see that on a couple legacy cards. There's a Pernicious Deed is another one that just lists a bunch of things, but so as a result doesn't kill Planeswalkers.
Right.
And we're going to go back to Troy's turn here. He's going to cast a Brainstorm. He does have that fetch land. He's going to get full value off this Brainstorm.
Still has Force of Will and a blue card.
Right, and that's pretty strong. As you said, you know, that Liliana in Edward's hand is one of his few ways to kill Elesh Norn. And now Force of Will is protecting the 4/7.
Yeah, I mean, the other game you can play is, can I get Tarmogoyf up to a 6/7? So then it gets shrunk down to a 4/5, and maybe you can block this Elesh Norn and find some way to actually attack around it.
Yeah, you'd force Troy to show and tell again, get something else into play. That works, but then like, so you stabilize, but then how do you win? You know, it still seems like to win, you'd have to kill that Elesh Norn.
The game goes on for a long time. The bug player tries to find some way to either remove the Elesh Norn or get enough Tarmogoyfs so that they can keep attacking.
So they need like 2 to 3 Tarmogoyfs in play?
Yeah, or just find a Liliana to actually kill the Elesh Norn, while the Reanimator player just tries to put another creature into play.
It's a plan. It's not a plan I'm thrilled about playing if I'm the bug
I've seen Elesh Norn get brickwalled. Generally, it was by something like Knight of the Reliquary, which can very easily be like a 10/10, you know?
Yeah.
And then actually eventually attack through it also. And
clock is ticking as Troy casts a second show and tell here. Edward still hasn't found the land yet, and this one might be lights out. You see Iona Shield of Emeria has joined the crew for Troy.
Yeah, if that name's black, that very well could do it.
Yeah, she would hit the play as a 9/9 thanks to Elesh Norn. It would lower the clock down to just a single turn after this resolves. And Edward does have the Tarmogoyf you mentioned, so that's a plus. The minus is, of course, that, you know, Troy does have the Iona.
Something a little bit bigger than a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. He draws a card off of Nile Spellbomb. It's Stifle. That's going to be no help. And it looks like Show and Tell is going to resolve. And you have to... So Tarmogoyf will... Looks like he'll be able to survive. There's Artifact, Creature, Sorcery. No more lands. He got rid of those. So the Goyf will survive. It won't be big enough to block Elesh Norn. And it certainly won't be flying enough to block this Iona.
Nor would it really want to be, I don't think. You're just throwing Tarmogoyf under the bus at that point, but gotta do what you gotta do, I guess.
Yep, Iona has been set to black, so the Liliana in Edward's hand is uncastable. There's the land he was waiting for. That one is a turn too late, if not more. You see Tarmogoyf we're figuring out the size on it. You're going to have to subtract 2. And I don't see what Troy. I don't see if Troy has a way to stop this 9/9 from beating him up.
So one of the things I like about Reanimator is that the show and tell package is actually really good at fighting against Graveyard Hate. You see that Eddie had a Deathrite Shaman early, a Grafdigger's Cage, a Nihil Spellbomb, and all it took was a couple of show and tells.
Yeah, Troy never used his graveyard at all this game.
Right. So in that regard, you got your opponent deciding a bunch of cards that are really not that great against you. I mean, sure, he has to keep in some of the Entomb, Reanimate type stuff, but he had Brainstorms to fix his hand and just find stuff that he actually needed.
He did get Edward to cast a 1-mana artifact that doesn't do anything.
Correct. So not only did you get him to put that in his deck, but also you got him to invest the time to cast it, perhaps kept the hand based on the strength or the presumed strength of Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, it goes ahead and looks at Iona here. Slight eyebrow raise there from Edward Warren, kind of looking at it like, oh, is that? And that's all she does, huh?
Yeah, just, really? I can't play any
I can't
black
play
cards?
anything?
That doesn't seem fair.
Does that include these Lilianas? Oh, yeah. Now, oh, we see it. We know. Yep. If that was any other creature, well, to be fair, if that was Griselbrand, that still might not be very good. We do know he had a lot of turns where he was trying to hit that 3rd mana. If he had, he would have had the answer for Elashnorn. The Liliana would have already been in play, which would have been enough to have the Iona covered. It would have been a different story.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, he would still have to get through Troy's Force of Will.
Right. He does have 2 Lilianas, though, so
yeah,
the second one would get through.
Yeah, given him enough time, he certainly had it.